In 1994, Dave Mustaine walked into a backstage room in Detroit with an offer that would have changed metal history forever. He wanted Vinnie Paul Abbott behind the drum kit for Megadeth's next album, and he was prepared to pay whatever it took. The number he mentioned made Vinnie's eyes widen, a figure that exceeded anything Pantera was making at the time, a salary that would have set him up financially for years. What Mustaine didn't know was that the decision wouldn't come down to money or opportunity. It would come down to a single sentence Vinnie spoke to his younger brother, Dimebag Darrel, later that night. 9 words that defined their relationship and ultimately sealed both their fates. But before that conversation happened, before Vinnie turned down what many considered the offer of a lifetime, there was the moment Mustaine realized he'd miscalculated. Because when you make an offer to Vinnie Paul Abbott, you're not just negotiating with a drummer. You're negotiating with half of a bond so strong it transcended everything the music industry valued. If you want to discover more untold stories from the legends who shaped metal history, stories about loyalty, brotherhood, and the decisions that defined careers, hit that subscribe button now. These moments deserve to be remembered. Detroit, Michigan, in October 1994 was cold and industrial, matching the aggressive sound Pantera had been perfecting for years. The band was on tour supporting Far Beyond Driven, their album that had debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 earlier that year. An unprecedented achievement for a metal band in the grunge-dominated landscape. Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrel were at the creative core of that success, their musical chemistry so tight that other musicians spoke about it with genuine awe. But cracks were forming. Phil Anselmo was dealing with chronic back pain that would lead to serious addiction issues. The pain was real, documented by medical professionals, stemming from years of intense performance. But the pills were changing him, making him distant, unreliable, harder to work with. The tension wasn't public yet, but within the band, everyone felt it. Vinnie and Dimebag particularly felt it, watching their vocalist struggle, watching the brotherhood they'd built start to strain. Dave Mustaine knew about the tension. Information travels fast in the metal world. Mustaine saw vulnerability where others saw success. Megadeth had just released Euthanasia to strong response, but Mustaine had drummer problems. Nick Menza was experiencing health issues and reliability concerns. Mustaine needed security behind the drum kit, needed someone who could handle Megadeth's technical complexity while bringing power and consistency. Vinnie Paul Abbott was the obvious choice. His playing combined jazz-influenced complexity with metal aggression. His production skills showed he understood recording as well as performance. More than that, Vinnie had the professional reputation Mustaine valued. Always on time, always prepared, never creating drama, delivering consistent quality night after night. The approach happened after Pantera's Detroit show, backstage where Mustaine asked Vinnie for a private conversation. What happened in that room over the next 45 minutes would become the subject of speculation in metal circles for decades. Because the offer Mustaine made wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, about joining one of metal's most established bands at a crucial moment, about security and opportunity. And Vinnie Paul's response would reveal what mattered to him more than any of those things. The Abbott brothers' bond was forged in Pantego, Texas, where their father Jerry ran a recording studio, and their mother Carolyn held the family together. Vinnie, born 3 years before Darrel, had always been the protective older brother. When Darrel showed extraordinary guitar talent at age 12, Vinnie didn't feel jealous. He felt determined to match that excellence on drums, so they could play together, create together, build something that belonged to both of them. They'd formed Pantera in 1981 when Vinnie was 18 and Darrel was 15. Throughout the 1980s, as they developed their sound and went through lineup changes, one constant remained. The Abbott brothers were a unit. Decisions got made together. Creative choices required consensus. Their musical telepathy wasn't metaphorical. It was the result of thousands of hours playing together, understanding each other's tendencies, anticipating moves before they happened. By 1994, when Mustaine made his offer, the brothers had been playing together for 13 years of constant collaboration, building something from nothing, proving that two kids from Texas could redefine what metal drumming and guitar work could sound like. That history wasn't something you walked away from for money. But the money was real and significant. According to people present, during negotiations, Mustaine's offer to Vinnie included a substantial signing bonus and per-album payments, exceeding what Vinnie made with Pantera. The offer included creative input on arrangements and production, acknowledging Vinnie's skills beyond drumming. For a musician who'd spent years struggling financially, this represented security and recognition at the highest level. Mustaine explained his vision for Megadeth's future, talked about upcoming tours, potential collaborations, the stability of an established operation compared to Pantera's increasingly chaotic dynamics. He acknowledged the tension with Phil, suggested Vinnie might find working with Mustaine easier than managing a vocalist spiraling into addiction. Some of what Mustaine said resonated because it was true. The situation with Phil was getting harder, but there was one factor Mustaine hadn't adequately weighted. Dimebag Darrel wasn't part of the package. Mustaine wanted a drummer, not a guitarist. There was no opening for Dimebag, no possibility of the Abbott brothers moving together. The offer required Vinnie to leave his brother behind, to break up the creative partnership that had defined both their lives. Vinnie didn't give Mustaine an immediate answer that night. He told him he needed time to think. What he really needed was to talk to his brother, because the conversation they'd have would determine everything. The tour bus pulled out of Detroit around 2 a.m. Inside, the post-show energy had settled into quiet exhaustion. Phil had gone to his bunk immediately. In the front of the bus, Vinnie sat with Dimebag, both drinking Blacktooth grins, talking in low tones about the conversation with Dave Mustaine. Dimebag knew about the offer. What he didn't know was how seriously Vinnie was considering it. Vinnie laid out the offer honestly, not hiding the financial appeal or professional opportunity. He talked about the stability Mustaine offered, the escape from growing tension, with Phil, the chance to work with different musicians. He wasn't trying to convince Dimebag of anything, just processing out loud. Dimebag listened without interrupting, let Vinnie talk through the entire proposition. Then Dimebag asked the question that cut through all the professional considerations. Do you want to play with someone else more than you want to play with me? It wasn't an accusation or emotional manipulation. It was a genuine question, delivered with characteristic directness. That question reframed everything for Vinnie Paul. Because when he thought about the actual experience of playing music, when he removed the money and security and escape from Phil's problems, when he focused on the pure creative act, he realized something fundamental. He didn't want to play with anyone else. The musical connection he had with his brother was the thing he valued most about his career. The Abbott brothers created something neither could replicate with anyone else. Synchronicity that came from growing up together, learning music together, developing skills in constant dialogue. Vinnie later said he'd made the decision in that moment, sitting on the tour bus with his brother, But he didn't tell Dimebag right away. He wanted to be certain, wanted to sit with the choice overnight. So they finished their drinks, talked about other things, eventually went to their bunks. But Vinnie didn't sleep much that night, testing his decision from different angles, making sure he wasn't making a mistake. By morning, the certainty had solidified. The money didn't matter. The escape from Phil's problems wasn't worth the cost. Vinnie called Dave Mustaine from a truck stop in Ohio, declined the offer, thanked him for the opportunity. The conversation was brief, professional, and final. Mustaine was disappointed but gracious, and they maintained cordial relations afterward. But the conversation with Dimebag that happened after Vinnie made the call would become legendary, a single sentence that encapsulated their entire relationship and explained a decision that seemed irrational to industry outsiders. When Vinnie hung up after declining Mustaine's offer, Dimebag was standing nearby, having heard enough to understand what happened. The brothers looked at each other, and Dimebag asked if Vinnie was sure, if he was going to regret walking away from that kind of money. And Vinnie Paul said the sentence that would define how people understood their relationship. "I'd rather be broke with you than rich with anyone else." 9 words. Simple, direct, unambiguous. Not a romantic declaration or dramatic pronouncement, just a statement of priority. The music they made together, the creative partnership they'd built, the bond of brotherhood. All of that was worth more than financial security or professional advancement. Vinnie wasn't being noble or self-sacrificing. He was being honest about what he valued. Dimebag's response was equally characteristic. He didn't get emotional or sentimental. He just nodded, said good, and suggested they go get breakfast. That was the Abbott brothers' dynamic, love and loyalty expressed through understatement and shared understanding rather than effusive declarations. The impact rippled through metal circles once word got out. Some musicians thought Vinnie was crazy, that turning down Megadeth money for Pantera loyalty was admirable but foolish. Others understood completely, recognized that some partnerships are irreplaceable. Dave Mustaine eventually found another drummer, continued Megadeth's success, and never publicly criticized Vinnie's choice. But he never made another offer to someone from Pantera, perhaps learning that the Abbott brothers were a package deal. For Vinnie and Dimebag, life continued with Pantera. They released The Great Southern Trendkill in 1996, showcasing both evolution and growing internal tensions. Phil's addiction problems became more public. The distance widened, and Mustaine's prediction about Pantera's difficulties proved accurate. But through it all, Vinnie and Dimebag remained united, their partnership the stable center, while everything else became chaotic. What Vinnie couldn't have known in 1994 was that his decision to stay with his brother would take on heartbreaking significance a decade later, when tragedy struck and staying together became impossible. Pantera officially disbanded in 2003 after years of mounting tension. The split was bitter, particularly between Phil and the Abbott brothers, with public statements revealing deep animosity. Vinnie and Dimebag immediately formed Damage Plan, determined to continue making music together. They'd survived the split, maintained their partnership, and were building something new when everything changed on December 8, 2004. Dimebag Darrel was shot and killed on stage during a Damage Plan performance at the Alrosa Villa in Columbus, Ohio. The gunman, Nathan Gale, fired 6 bullets, killing Dimebag and 3 others before being killed by police. The tragedy devastated the metal community, but no one suffered more than Vinnie Paul, who lost not just his brother and musical partner, but the person he'd built his entire life around, the reason he'd turned down opportunities, the center of his creative world. Vinnie's grief was profound and lasting. He stopped playing drums for several years, couldn't bring himself to engage with music when music had always meant playing with Dimebag. When he eventually returned to performing with Hell Yeah and later projects, he spoke frequently about his brother, kept Dimebag's memory central to everything he did. He also maintained his anger at Phil Anselmo, whom he blamed for contributing to circumstances that led to Pantera's dissolution. Vinnie never forgave Phil, never reconciled, carried that resentment until his own death in 2018. When Vinnie Paul died of heart disease at age 54, he was buried next to his brother at Moore Memorial Garden Cemetery in Arlington, Texas. The two Abbott brothers, separated for 14 years by death, were together again. And in the aftermath, musicians and fans revisited the stories of their bond, including the 1994 decision to turn down Megadeth, and those 9 words took on additional weight. "I'd rather be broke with you than rich with anyone else." The question metal fans asked for years was whether Vinnie regretted his decision, whether he ever wondered what his life would have looked like if he'd taken Mustaine's offer and avoided the tragedy that followed. The answer, based on every interview Vinnie gave between 2004 and 2018, was unambiguous. No regret whatsoever. When asked directly about the Megadeth offer in a 2006 Revolver magazine interview, Vinnie said turning down the opportunity was one of the easiest decisions he'd ever made. "You don't choose between your brother and a job," he said. "That's not a real choice. The job ends, money gets spent, opportunities come and go. But your brother, your real partnership, that's permanent." Some suggested that if Vinnie had joined Megadeth, Dimebag might not have been on that stage in Columbus, might still be alive. Vinnie addressed this forcefully. "Anyone who thinks I should have abandoned my brother to save him doesn't understand anything about us. We were together. That's who we were." The legacy of Vinnie's decision extended beyond the Abbott brothers' story. It became a reference point in discussions about loyalty in the music industry, about choosing artistic partnerships over financial opportunities. Young musicians cited the story when explaining why they stayed with certain bands despite better offers. Industry veterans pointed to it as an example of integrity in a business often dominated by opportunism. Dave Mustaine spoke about the incident years later, after both Abbott brothers had died. In a 2019 interview, he acknowledged he'd misunderstood the situation, had approached Vinnie as an individual when the Abbott brothers were fundamentally a unit. "I offered him a great opportunity," Mustaine said, "but I was asking him to give up something irreplaceable. I respect that he knew what mattered and didn't let money cloud that judgment." But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from fans who'd watched the Abbott brothers' career, who understood what made their musical connection special. In metal communities and fan discussions that continued years after both brothers had died, people consistently returned to one theme. The Abbott brothers made music that sounded like brotherhood, that carried the weight of their connection in every note. The synchronicity between Vinnie's drumming and Dimebag's guitar wasn't just technical precision, it was emotional resonance. The sound of two people who understood each other so completely that their instruments became extensions of a single creative consciousness. That sound was what Vinnie chose to protect when he turned down Megadeth. He understood that joining another band would mean losing the thing that made his musical life meaningful. Playing with Dimebag wasn't just a job or career, it was an identity, and Vinnie wasn't willing to trade that for anything. The tragedy of Dimebag's death made the 1994 decision even more poignant because it revealed what Vinnie had known all along. The time they had together was precious. The music they made together was irreplaceable, and choosing to preserve that partnership was the right decision, regardless of what happened later. Vinnie got 10 more years with his brother after declining Mustaine's offer. 10 years of creating music, touring, building Damage Plan. Those years weren't perfect, but they were years spent in partnership, and that made them valuable in ways money couldn't measure. When metal historians assess the Abbott brothers' legacy now, they recognize the 1994 Megadeth offer as a defining moment, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't happen. Vinnie Paul could have left, could have prioritized financial security, could have made the smart business decision. Instead, he made the decision that reflected his values. 9 words that summarized an entire philosophy. I'd rather be broke with you than rich with anyone else. The Abbott brothers never got rich by industry standards, though they achieved commercial success. But they had something richer. A creative partnership so strong it survived industry pressure, family tragedy, band dissolution, and personal crisis. When Vinnie died in 2018, when he was laid to rest next to his brother, their story came full circle. The bond that had defined their lives remaining unbroken even by death. That's the real meaning of the Megadeth offer. It wasn't about money or missed opportunities. It was about knowing what you value, protecting what matters, and refusing to compromise the things that make your life meaningful. In a music industry built on ambition and opportunism, the Abbott brothers built something different. Loyalty, partnership, brotherhood. And when tested, Vinnie Paul said no without hesitation, without regret, without doubt. Because some partnerships are worth more than any alternative. Some bonds are worth protecting at any cost. And sometimes, the best decision is to stay exactly where you are, with exactly who you're with. Because what you already have is better than anything else you could possibly find.